Benny Hammond was gently massaging his hair in front of the mirror. It has been a month since a celestial boy became the owner of a fast food restaurant in Hawkins, Indiana, USA. In this month's time, Benny has accepted the reality. He was originally a programmer and worked in a small mobile game company. He worked overtime until midnight that day. Finally, he fixed the bug and looked at the time. He simply stayed at the company if he didn't want to go back. He secretly opened a back door for himself and prepared to go to the company. In the game that was just developed, there was a big fight. Who knew that he had just adjusted the various values, and his eyes went black and fainted. After waking up, it became the same as it is now. This body was named Benny Hammond, and he opened a fast food restaurant in the small town of Hawkins, Indiana, and had a good life. Benny touched the worrisome head and sighed secretly. To say that Benny is quite satisfied with the current situation in all aspects, only the hair, which makes him always worry about it. He has gone through, why is he still a bald? Carefully moisten precious hair with water, rinse off Benny while wiping his hair with a towel, while silently calling from the bottom of my heart, attributes. Immediately, a detailed character attribute panel appeared in front of you. Yes, after he crossed over, he even brought the modified game characters. Name, Benny Hammond. Age, 33 HP, 200,200 MP, 1,515 Equipment, none. Skill, 1. The Immortal Body passive, it will automatically trigger when the health value drops to 1 point, it will not consume mana, and the health value will be locked to 1 point for 24 hours. The cooling time is 24 hours. 2. Sage time. 3. The strings of stars fall high. 4. Hey! I knew I would go through, so I adjusted the magic value to the highest level. After wiping his hair, Benny murmured secretly. His number has unlocked all the skills in the game, but this is of no use. Because this game releases skills to consume mana. Poorly, his upper limit of mana is only 15. Even so, Benny was just a pity, not too disappointed. After all, in this simple rural town, he really didn't know the use of these devastating skills. This is not the Marvel world. As far as the month he came here, the only use of his skill was to make cigarette lighter and perform magic tricks. After washing, Benny changed his clothes, turned the open hanging on the door, opened the door, and the fast food restaurant officially opened. The town is not prosperous. His fast food restaurant is handed down from his father's generation and is deeply loved by the residents of the town. When the fast food restaurant opens, customers will soon come in. The fast food restaurant is not big. The entrance is the counter, with dining tables on both sides, behind the counter is the kitchen, and further back, there is a back door leading to the woods behind the house. Most of the people who came to visit were acquaintances, and Benny was busy in the kitchen while chatting with the guests. Most of the guests who come in the morning are office workers who can't make breakfast in time. They don't sit in the store to eat. They basically take the food away and eat while on the road. When they arrive at the workplace, the breakfast is also finished. Soon, Benny sent away the last guest and began to hum and clean up. Benny, who was mopping the floor, paused, looked up in the direction of the kitchen, and vaguely saw a figure flashing past, running towards the back door. This made Benny interested. He put down the mop and walked toward the kitchen while pulling out the skill panel, choosing from several skills within the range of 15 mana. Should I use the small fireball technique to scorch the thief's hair first, or use the thunder technique to give the thief electrotherapy? Benny hesitated. Turning the counter, Benny rubbed his fingers, took a big step, and grabbed the thief who had run to the door, tried to make a vicious expression, and shouted coarsely. "Hey! Boy! Are you looking for death?" As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a pale face come into view, making Benny stunned. This is a little girl with only 1 or 2 centimeters of hair. She looks like she is only 10 years old. She is thin and pale, wrapped in a torn checkered bed sheet, bare feet, looking at him with horrified eyes. Trembling uncontrollably, Benny felt soft, released the palm of his hand on the little girl's shoulder, and greeted as kindly as he could. "Don't be afraid, are you hungry?" As he said, Benny reached out from the console and took the fries that the little girl had just stolen and passed it over. "Go over there and sit down and eat slowly, and I'll make something for you." The little girl saw the fries, her eyes lit up. After hesitating for a while, her hunger finally overcame her fear. She took the fries and went to the front dining table while gulping into her mouth. Gee, Benny sighed in his heart, it's better to have a great time, at least not to go hungry. When the little girl reached for the 7th steak, Benny finally couldn't help but ask. "Have your parents forgotten to give you food? That's why you ran away from home? Did they beat you? You went to the hospital and were so scared that you came here?" Having said this, the little girl finally reacted. She looked up at Benny, and continued to bow her head and gulp. Benny thought for a while, leaned down and said, "Well, you can eat as much as you want, but you have to answer a few questions for me. What's your name?" Seeing the little girl just looking at herself without saying a word, Benny pointed at herself. "Benny, my name is Benny, what's your name?" The little girl remained silent. Benny looked down and glanced at the girl's wrist. There are 2 small dark cyan characters engraved there. 11. What does it mean? Seeing that the little girl was still silent, Benny reached out and grabbed the steak in her hand and said, "Well, in this case, then you don't eat it." "No." The little girl yelled in a low voice and pointed her finger at herself. 11. 11. Benny let go of the steak and looked at the little girl. At this moment, Benny thought a lot. Crazy human experiments, Frankenstein, T-virus, zombies all over the world, Resident Evil. For a long time, the little girl's chewing sound pulled him back to reality. Benny looked at the little girl gorging in front of him with a complicated expression, not knowing what to do. He has a long hair, bare feet, pale face, and his name is 11. Hawkins Township, Indiana. Benny was shocked and stood up from his chair. Isn't this a weird thing? Thinking of this, Benny couldn't help but look back at the counter. Just now, he took advantage of the skill of cooking 11 steaks and called the community service. If this is really the world of Stranger Things, wouldn't he throw himself into the trap? After making up his mind, Benny came back to his senses and saw that 11 was holding a big bucket of ice cream and eating all over his face. She seemed to feel Benny's gaze. She paused when she was digging the ice cream, and looked up at Benny in perplexity. Benny shook his head, got up and took a towel to clean her face, then took the wallet and walked downstairs. "I'll buy you some clothes, don't run around, don't make a noise when someone knocks on the door outside." After explaining, I didn't hear 11's response as expected, but Benny didn't care too much about it. He knew that 11 had listened to it, but she was always bad at words. In my memory, there were 3 seasons of Weird Stories, and the entire 3 seasons. At the end of the day, the lines of 11 didn't seem to exceed 300 words, and most of them were interjections like and ah. The Benny fast food restaurant is next door to a children's clothing shop. The owner is a Mexican girl who often visits Benny's fast food restaurant to eat and drink at night. The two are fairly familiar. With the help of the Mexican girl, he took a few sets of clothes and hummed a little tune that no one could understand. Benny returned to the restaurant with the shopping bag, and then he was stunned. "Hi Ben, is this your daughter?" Hearing the movement, a bearded man turned his head and asked. After finishing speaking, before Benny responds, he stepped forward and grabbed the shopping bag in Benny's hand, took out the clothes inside and compared it, and then looked at Benny exaggeratedly. "Oh Ben, did you buy this for her?" Benny took back the shopping bag and stuffed it into 11's hand. "You go upstairs and change your clothes first. I have something to talk with Hope." 11 look at Hope, then at Benny, took the shopping bag and went upstairs. Wow, you go upstairs and change your clothes first. I have something to talk to the Hope. Hope repeated Benny's voice and laughed. 1 burger, plus 3 steaks, right? Benny looked as usual and handed the burger to Hope with skill. Hope is the sheriff of Hawkins Township and Benny's original good friend. He is also a Benny high school classmate. He is a school bully and a famous stallion in the town. There are rumors that at least one-third of the women in the town are spent with him. Benny knew this was a rumor. The truth is, at least half. From the Mexican girl next door to the mayor's secretary, including the administrator of the library, they all have a relationship with Hope. Bringing Hope's burger to the table and passing it over, Benny sat down opposite Hope. Hope, I need your help. Hope grabbed the hamburger and chewed it. Hearing the words, he grabbed the Coke on the side and filled it with 2 bites, washed the food down, and asked suspiciously. What's wrong? She is the daughter of one of my elder brothers. I found this place suddenly today. I want to adopt her. Can you help me with the adoption procedures? Hope frowned, took another bite of the burger, and asked vaguely, We have known each other for more than 20 years, why haven't I heard that you have an older brother? It belongs to my uncle who went to prison, you know, old Hammond never waits to see his uncle, never let us mention him. Hope nodded. Benny's father, Hammond Sr., did have a younger brother. It is said that he was arrested for drug trafficking and died in prison. Hammond Sr. regarded him as the shame of the Hammond family. Well, Hope responded, then hesitated, but it may take 2 days. Why? Benny asked knowingly. Ben, Joey's youngest son Will is missing. I have to help find him. When I find Will, I will help you go through the adoption procedures. With that, Hope winked at Benny, making Benny dumbfounded. Joey Byers is the mother of Will Byers, one of the protagonists. She also has an eldest son named Jonathan Byers. Joey divorced her husband early. In addition, Joey is also a classmate of their high school, since graduating from high school, has been a little involved with Hope. Benny didn't want to care about the nasty between the two of them, his goal had been achieved. Will from Joey's. Benny pretended to be unknowingly exclaimed, then pretended to hesitate and struggle, and finally spoke as if he was determined. Hope, if you need help, just tell me. Joey is a good woman. Hope nodded and was not polite with Benny. After eating the burger in 2s, he took the hat on the side, got up and said hello to Benny, and opened the door to leave. Benny sat there for a while, locked the door again, and went upstairs. Hope even has the key to his fast food restaurant. It can be said that the relationship between the two of them is extraordinary. In the month since his rebirth, Benny has gradually become acquainted with Hope. In addition to having with half of the women in the town, the people in other places are very nice. However, Benny remembers that in the original plot, Hope seemed to be dead in the end. Time soon came to night. Benny has cleaned up another guest room and used it as the 11th bedroom. At the table, after putting the 7th steak on the table, Benny was relieved after watching 11 finally had his fill. Why doesn't he remember that 11 in the original plot is still a big stomach king? After eating and watching TV for a while, Benny led 11 to the bedroom and settled into bed. Well, it's time to go to bed, good night. Good night. 11 lay on the bed obediently and whispered. Benny was stunned, smiled and nodded, kissed 11's forehead, turned and walked to the door, turned off the light and left. Go back to your bedroom, turn off the light, go to bed, and go to sleep. The room fell into darkness, and it was quiet outside. In a daze, Benny vaguely heard a rustling sound coming from outside, and then, accompanied by a loud noise, he was completely awake. Benny stood up, rushed into 11's bedroom, turned on the light, and saw 11 sitting on the bed, looking at him in horror. Not afraid, not afraid. Benny hurriedly went to comfort him. After finally calming down 11, Benny asked carefully. Have a nightmare? 11 shaking his head, pointing to the lamp on top of his head, whispered Black. This should be a sequelae of being done too many experiments in the laboratory. Benny remembers that in the secret laboratory, 11 had been used for sensory deprivation tests on many occasions, locked in a tank full of liquid, and surrounded by darkness. Okay, let's not turn off the lights, just turn on the lights. 11 nodded. Staying with 11 for a while, seeing her sleepy, Benny helped her tuck the quilt, got up and left. Good night. Walking to the door, the voice of 11 came from behind. Good night. Benny smiled. Leaving the bedroom, Benny did not return to the bedroom, but walked downstairs. Just upstairs, he vaguely saw a few red names hovering around the house, thinking it should be the people from the laboratory. Benny crouched behind the counter and counted 3 times in a row. After confirming that the 9 red names came, he thought for a moment and started to act. Taking advantage of the red names outside the house, he slipped out from the back door and ran to the edge of the woods behind the house. Only then did he deliberately make a noise to attract the red names. There! Quick! Quick! Catch up! Hearing the sound of the red names behind him, Benny took the time to glance back and was startled. He made the problem simple. Originally, he thought he could run into the woods to attract all the red names, so that he could find a place where they would not be seen, and solve the red names in one fell swoop, but now he does attract a large number of red names to catch up, but there are still 2 red names wandering around the fast food restaurant. He must solve the 7 red names behind him as soon as possible, otherwise the 2 will break in and find 11. Thinking of this, Benny stopped. Seeing Benny stopped, the 7 red names chasing behind also stopped. They raised their guns at Benny, moved slowly, surrounded the Benny group, and then slowly approached. Benny stood where he was, saying nothing, not moving. 10 meters. 8 meters. 5 meters. 3 meters. It's now. Benny looked up suddenly, and a black light circle centered on him, spreading towards the surroundings, unobtrusive in the darkness of the woods. The aperture spread and enveloped the 7 people. The 7 people felt their feet sink. Before they could react, they fell to the ground and couldn't get up. Gravity restraint, active skill, consumes 15 mana points. Drives the dark force to form a gravity field within 3 meters of the surrounding area, making the enemy restrained by gravity and unable to move. The gravity field lasts for 10 seconds. Can be upgraded. Benny stooped to pick up a pistol in Red Name's hand, and the muzzle was attached to Red Name's temple. Puff! With a muffled sound, the Red Name died. Puff puff puff. Benny dealt with several people one by one, did not immediately dispose of the corpse, but ran to the fast food restaurant holding a pistol. There, the 2 red names have entered the fast food restaurant and are searching in the shop on the first floor. When Benny entered through the back door, a red name had already reached the corner of the stairs and was about to go upstairs. Hearing the sound of the back door, he stopped at the stairs and gestured quietly to another companion. There is a system showing that Benny is not afraid of the dark. After all, the 2 red names that are so bright are dangling in front of you, it is difficult to not see them. Benny leaned back on the counter, motionless, staring wide-eyed at a red name coming from the front door. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Benny counted silently in his heart. The moment when the red name passed by him, he raised his hand, and the muzzle of his hand was placed on the red name's head. Puff! With a muffled sound, the red name disappeared. While firing the gun, Benny squatted down quickly and pulled the red name in front of him to block him. Puff puff! Sure enough, the red name on the stairs fired several shots towards Benny, but fortunately, there was a dead body in front of him, and the bullet did not hurt him. The last red name emptied a magazine, and the restaurant fell silent again. Benny was carrying the corpse, motionless. The red name was standing on the stairs, staring around looking for Benny. When the 2 sides were in a stalemate, there was a sound of footsteps upstairs. Benny was anxious, and Hongming was overjoyed. As the lights came on, a little girl with small hair in pink pajamas was standing at the top of the stairs, staring down and looking down. 11, go back. Benny poked his head from under the corpse and shouted upstairs. 11's eyes fell on Benny. Benny wiped the stench of blood on his face and shouted again, go back. Obedient. The corpse was covered by him to block the gun, and the blood almost soaked him. 11, seeing that Benny was covered in blood, his pupils contracted, and the fists that fell on both sides of his body gradually clenched. She shifted her gaze to Hongming at the top of the stairs, lowered her head slightly, and stared at him with hatred in her eyes. Before the red name could move his gun, he flew up the stairs with a whistle, slammed heavily on the counter, and rolled down in front of Benny. Benny's eyes lit up, he drew a pistol from under the body, and fired several shots at the red name who was vomiting blood. Puff puff, the red name disappeared, and he lay motionless on the ground, and the dark red blood of Dayton poured out of his body. Benny pushed the corpse away and sat down on the ground. Before taking the cigarette out of his pocket, he was hugged by a thin body. Feeling the two cold little hands groping around on his body, Benny was taken aback, then dropped the cigarette case in his hand and saved 11. Okay, I'm fine, I'm not injured, this is his blood. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Under Benny's constant comfort, 11 finally settled down. He returned to the upstairs with 11 in his arms. He wanted to settle 11 first and then deal with the corpse, but whenever he turned and went downstairs, 11 would get up and follow him down. In desperation, Benny had to put 11 down. At the dining table, let her watch and start to dispose of the dead body. He dragged the corpse from the back door to the pickup, then dragged the 7 corpses out of the woods, loaded them together, transported them to the depths of the woods for disposal, and then drove back to clean the blood on the floor. When the blood was finally wiped clean, the sky was already bright. Putting 11 to sleep, Benny returned to the dining room downstairs lightly, lit a cigarette, and started smoking silently. He thought it simple. The woman was dealt with by him during the day, how could the laboratory not continue to send people over? Benny's mind has always been on the monsters in the inner world, but he has ignored the people in the laboratory. Fortunately, he has already hinted at Hope. If we can't search for Will again today, the town will organize a search and rescue team to expand the search. At that time, he can take 11 as a matter of course to participate in and follow Hope around. With Hope, their safety is greatly improved, and at the same time they can participate in the plot, which is less obtrusive and will make the laboratory a little jealous. Even if the laboratory ignores the presence of Hope, the sergeant still sends killers. He doesn't need to be like today. It takes one night to deal with the corpse, and he can't even sleep well. Tonight is a frightening event. Except for manipulating the mind to smash a table under the excitement of 11, there is no loss. Not only that, with these 9 red names in the account, his MP limit has been increased to 25 points, which is 1. The pen is not a small gain. After making sure that there was no omission, Benny squeezed out the cigarette in his hand and got upstairs. After busy working all night, he now wants to take a good rest. As for fast food restaurants, wait until he wakes up. Benny stayed asleep until noon until he got up. If he hadn't been sitting in front of his bed at 11, looking at him with his eyes straightened up like he was looking at a stack of steaks, he could continue to sleep. As soon as Hope's large portion of hamburger was made, there was a door opening, and Hope pushed in. "Hi, 11. Hope greeted 11 who was sitting at the dining table, took the burger over and ate it. Benny was grilling steak for 11 while chatting with Hope. "Did Will Jr. find it?" Hope took a big bite of the burger, shook his head, and said vaguely, "No. In the afternoon, I plan to organize the townspeople to form a search and rescue team to expand the scope of the search. Okay, I'll go back to the police station with you in a while, and by the way, I will go through the adoption procedures for her. Benny came over and sat down with a stack of steaks and said with a smile. Hey! Ben! Hope yelled in dissatisfaction, but did not say much. Benny and him have been good friends since middle school, and until now, this good friend is still single, and now he has a well-behaved child, so he can understand the eagerness. The two ate and talked, and soon the lunch was over, and Benny led 11 behind Hope to go to the police station. As soon as I went out, I met a pale lady in front of me. Hi, Joey. I heard about Will. Don't worry, I will find it. I am going to the police station to sign up for the search and rescue team. It was Joey, Will's mother, a middle school classmate of Benny and Hope. Thank you, I'm here to post a missing person notice. Can you post one in your restaurant? Of course, of course. Give it to me, I'll post it in a prominent place. Benny took 2 missing persons notices, one on the glass of the front door and one on the counter. Thanks. Joey thanked him and left in a hurry. Let's go. Benny locked the door again and followed Hope to the police station. When he arrived at the police station, Benny greeted the people in the police station one by one, and went all the way into Hope's office. The relationship between him and Hope is well known in the whole town. His restaurant is not far from the police station. They often take care of business, so they are very familiar with each other. I got the search and rescue team's form and filled it out, and then filled in the adoption form. At this time, Hope had left the police station in his car and continued to search for Will. After receiving the form that had been sent, and waiting for a few days of reply, Benish made an appointment with everyone, and after returning from search and rescue at night, he came to the restaurant to gather, and then took 11 home. Do you know that kid? Benny asked in a low voice on the way. 11 looked up at Benny. He's in another world, isn't he? Benny smiled at 11 and continued. Just after Joey came to post the missing person notice, 11 kept staring at the photo above. Not only Benny noticed her abnormal behavior, but Hope also noticed it. Don't be so obvious in front of others in the future. Hope is a good friend of mine. Even if he knows about you, he won't say much, but other people may not. Benny told 11. Back in the restaurant, Benny, who was about to go upstairs, was pulled by 11. 11 refers to the radio on the counter, and refers to the missing person notice, and looks at Benny. Benny walked to the table and sat down and looked at 11. He knows that 11 can communicate with others with consciousness in addition to mind control. Her ability is a bit like Professor X in X-Men, but it's not that powerful. 11 Close your eyes and stand quietly in front of the radio. The dining room is quiet. Sha sha sha. After a while, there was a rustling sound on the radio, accompanied by heavy breathing and monsters roaring. 11 There were a few drops of nosebleeds under the nose, and he opened his eyes in horror. Hey! 11, don't be afraid, I'm here, don't be afraid. Benny hugged 11 and patted her back gently to soothe her. Scared. 11 said, pointing to the photo on the missing person notice. I know, listen to me on 11, we will join the search and rescue team in a while, you should not behave abnormally in front of them, or you will attract people from the laboratory. 11's reaction was somewhat beyond Benny's expectations. She used her abilities to get a nosebleed, Benny remembered it, but she didn't expect that she would care about Will so much. It stands to reason that the two of them don't know each other at all, and shouldn't care about him so much. Soothed 11 and helped her clean up blood stains. After a short rest, Benny led 11 back to the police station. At this time, the police station had gathered a lot of people, and they all came to join the search and rescue team. The police divided them into several teams and divided them into different search areas. Everyone hurried towards their respective areas. Benny drove a pickup and drove 11 towards the quarry outside the town. At his strong request, he and 11 were divided into the area where Hope is located. After arriving near the quarry, get off and meet Hope. Hope looked at 11, looked up at Benny, and said nothing. Hope, I can't leave her alone at home. Benny explained. The search and rescue work in the afternoon continued until the evening, and nothing was found. The exhausted search and rescue teams greeted each other, jumped into their respective cars, and hurried home. Benny followed Hope back to the police station to see the time was almost up, and stood in the middle of the room and clapped his hands. Guys, after searching for a day, everyone is tired, go to the restaurant to eat something and then go back. I pay the bill, it's free. The police applauded in a loud voice, and the movements of their hands sped up a bit. Hope, you come too. Benny turned around and proposed. Hope thought for a while, got up and followed Benny to the restaurant. Back in the restaurant, 11 was handed over to Hope to take care of him. Benny changed into a chef's uniform and got busy after getting in. These police officers are all acquaintances. Although they don't need to entertain high-end dishes, almost all of them are big appetites, and he will have to work hard next. The police rushed to the restaurant in twos and threes. The originally quiet restaurant gradually became lively. Benny just cooked in the kitchen and put it on the counter when he was done, and someone came to pick up the meal. Time gradually passed, and the night was already late, and the full-fed people left in twos and threes. Soon, Benny, 11, and Hope were left in the restaurant. Hope didn't rest well yesterday. He wanted to leave a long time ago and was stayed by Benny strong. It's a little too much, just stay with me for one night. Benny said as he cleaned up. Hope glanced at the clock behind the counter, didn't think much, and led 11 upstairs. After finishing the cleaning, Benny closed the doors and windows, glanced at the red name outside the store, turned off the lights and followed upstairs. After embracing Scott enthusiastically, watching Scott lead 11 into the class, Benny left the school. The search in the afternoon finally made progress. Hope saw a strip of cloth at the mouth of a sewage pipe. The strip was dirty and could not see the original color. Benny looked at the people who were going to search the sewage pipe, a little bit dumbfounded. At a glance, he recognized that strip of cloth belonged to 11. 11 should have crawled out of the laboratory along the sewage pipe, but now everyone regards it as Will's whereabouts. But it's not wrong to think so, after all, there is indeed a door to the inner world under the laboratory, and Will is indeed in the inner world. Just go through the gate and you will find Will. After learning that the sewage pipe leads to the secret laboratory of the Ministry of Energy, Hope asked others to continue searching, and he drove to the laboratory to check. I am coming too. As soon as he started the car, Benny followed him into the car. Don't rush to refuse, Hope. Listen to me. I used to work for the CIA. Maybe I can help. Hope was silent for a moment and nodded in agreement. On the other side, Hawkins Middle School. The school bell rang and students rushed out of the classroom. Scott led 11 back to his office, waiting for Benny to pick him up. After a while, the door of the office was knocked, and then 3 little boys broke in. Mr. Scott, has the high-power radio communication equipment you mentioned arrived? As soon as he entered the door, the chubby little boy on the far left hurriedly asked. The little fat man wore a hat and was missing a front tooth, and his speech was a little leaky. Justin, Lucas, Mike. Scott greeted the 3 little boys, pointed to the equipment on the table, and smiled. Of course it's here, come and try. Oh, yes. This is 11, come today. 11, this is Justin, Lucas, and Mike. Scott introduced the 4 children one by one, and then said, you are playing here, I have something to go out. You 3 boys should take care of 11.11, wait here to pick you up, don't run around. After the explanation, Scott left. The fate is very strange, although 11 was not picked up by Mike as in the original plot, the 4 of them quickly became friends. Mike, Lucas, Justin, and the missing Will, the 4 of them are very, very good friends. Together they won the first prize of the school's Science and Technology Awards. They played Dragon and Dungeons together and made radio together. The four friends almost talked about everything. Justin is the little fat boy who lives with his mother and loves mechanics and physics. Lucas is a black guy with a younger sister in the family. Although she looks lean, she is actually very strong. Mike is the core of the four, faintly becoming the leader. There is an older sister and a younger sister in his family, and the older sister Nancy also attends Hawkins Middle School. Mike's sister Nancy is in a relationship with Hawkins Middle School boss Steve, and the two are fighting fiercely. As for the missing Will, there is an older brother, Jonathan, who is also attending Hawkins Middle School. The two brothers live with their mother, and their parents have long since divorced. Like his brother Jonathan, Will is a very introverted person. He doesn't speak much on weekdays. Will and Mike are three little friends. Jonathan simply has no friends and is often alone. Now that Will is missing, Mike and the three are in no better mood than Joey, but they have discussed for a long time and have no clue. They only remember that Will brought the cordless power they made when he disappeared, thinking that maybe they could find more power. You can contact Will. Your name is 11? Hello, this is Mike. Lucas and Justin are tinkering with the radio, and only Mike is very enthusiastic to get in touch with 11. A few people fiddled for a long time, but it didn't work. When they were frustrated, Will's voice suddenly came from the radio, which shocked the people and gathered together. Several people babbled a few words, intermittently, anxiously. The radio returned to a rustle of electric current. Behind the three of them, 11 bowed his head and wiped a handful of blood from under his nose and twitched the corner of his mouth. The other side. Mike's sister, Nancy, couldn't help Steve's frustration, and finally agreed to go to his house for a party of only 4 people. Nancy is a good girl, and this is the first time that she lied to her parents and met her boyfriend. It was irritating to feel a little uneasy in her heart. She found her best friend Barbie and went with her. Nancy's intention was to let Barbie stop herself from doing stupid things, but after that, under Steve's persuasion, the balance in her heart gradually tilted to Steve's side. Nancy gradually let go of her guard and play with Steve. N.S. When she came out of the pool to go upstairs to change clothes with Steve, Barbie stopped her. Nancy, we should go. Barbie shook the wound on his hand and said seriously. She accidentally cut her hand just now, and the bleeding hasn't stopped at this time. Barbie, you go back first, I want to stay. After hesitating for a moment, looking at Steve who was begging and eager, Nancy made up his mind and spoke. Barbie glanced at Nancy deeply, but did not persuade him. Steve and Nancy came to the bedroom, and Steve's friends and girlfriend also walked into the guest room. Barbie was the only one left in the lively courtyard just now. Barbie sat by the pool, looking bored at the starry sky, rubbing the wound on his hand, feeling the tingling pain from the wound. On the opposite side of the courtyard, Will's brother Jonathan was hiding in the bushes, taking a sneak shot in the direction of the courtyard. After the shutter sounded, seeing that there was not much film left, he turned and left. He was out looking for his younger brother, but when he saw Nancy accidentally, his heart moved slightly, and he couldn't help but start taking pictures. After Jonathan turned and left, a shadow appeared in the pool below Barbie, and the lights in the courtyard flickered. When the lights returned to normal, Barbie was already gone by the pool. After Benny and Hope entered the laboratory and explained their intentions, they were led by the security personnel to the monitoring room to check the monitoring. Hope was looking at the surveillance seriously. Benny was looking at the surveillance on the surface, but in fact he scanned the dense red names around him, and secretly swallowed his saliva. So many red names. So many MP caps. Benny resisted the urge to do it, and finally watched the surveillance video with Hope, and found nothing, as guessed. After getting in the car, Hope asked, "Did you see anything? Has a problem?" Benny replied without thinking. Although he didn't watch the video carefully, he remembered the plot. Hope nodded and drove towards Hawkins Middle School. "Yes, I also think there is a problem. It rained heavily the day Will disappeared, and there was no rain at all in the surveillance video. Just when 11 secretly helped the three of Mike and Will get in touch, Will's mother Joey was also waiting at home nervously. It has been 3 days since Will disappeared, and she hasn't closed her eyes yet. Every time he closes his eyes, he sees all kinds of misery in Will. But she can't do anything and can only wait for the result of the police station. I was waiting restlessly. Suddenly, the lights in the room began to flicker, and then the phone on the wall rang. Joey jumped up from the sofa and quickly picked up the phone. Hey! Sashisha, Mom! Will's voice faintly came from the phone, accompanied by the roar of unknown creatures, which shocked Joey and quickly hugged the phone and cried and asked. Will? Is it Will? Where are you? I'm Mom, where are you? There was no answer on the phone, the lights in the room began to flicker violently, and then the phone banged and black smoke appeared. Will? Will? No. No. No no no. Will? Joey broke down and shouted while holding the phone. The lights in the room began to flicker violently, and the collapsed Joey followed the lights all the way to Will's bedroom. Pushing the door open, the stereo in Will's bedroom rang. It was a tape that Jonathan gave to Will. It was a song by his favorite band. Then, the sound stopped and everything returned to normal. Joey wiped his tears, picked up the bag and rushed out of the house. She rushed all the way to the grocery store, swept away the colorful lights on the shelves, and began to hang them when she returned home. Joey had a feeling that Will was always by her side and never left. The lanterns were hung up, and the electricity was turned on one by one, and Joey cautiously shouted Will. It's quiet all around, and the colorful lights illuminate the room colorfully. Just as Joey was disappointed to prepare to put away the colored lights, all the lights in the room suddenly went out. Then, the colorful lights light up one by one. Joey trembled with excitement. She tried to restrain the feeling of fainting, and followed the guidance of the colorful lights to the closet. Open the closet, and there is a small white lamp inside. Will? Joey cried out cautiously while holding the small lamp. The lantern in his arms turned on for a while, then went out. Joey was overjoyed. She wiped away her tears, holding the little lamp and said, Will, Mom knows you are there, Mom always knows you are. Will, don't be afraid. Mom is here. Listening to my mother will ask a few questions. If the answer is yes, you can make it light up, if not, you can make it light up twice. Understand? After a moment of silence, the light ball in Joey's arms lit up. Okay, Will, isn't it safe on your side? The lights came on for a while. Joey couldn't help but shed tears while holding the ball of light. How are you? The light group hesitated for a moment and then turned on. Just when Joey was about to ask how to find him, the lights began to flicker hurriedly, and the colorful lights in the room followed the mountain. At the same time, waves of unknown came from the wall behind Joey. Roar! Will! Will! Joey yelled anxiously while holding the lamp ball. On the wall behind him, the wallpaper began to fall off, a layer of mucous membrane was supported and raised, and it was grabbed towards Joey. Joey turned his head abruptly, just in time with the mucous membrane. She screamed in fright, rushed out of the house holding the light ball, sat in the car, shaking hands and feet, took out the keys and left. The flashing lights in the room returned to normal, and the surrounding area was quiet. Joey sat in the car for a while, then plucked up the courage to get out of the car and return to the room. In the room, the newly raised wall is intact. Will! Will! Joey yelled while holding the ball of light, and the light did not flicker anymore, responding to her call. Joey bit her lower lip. She turned out the paint and began to paint the letters on the wall. Then she removed a section of colored lights and placed them on the letters one by one. Then she held the newly bought phone and waited quietly. I don't know how long it took, there was a sound of electricity in the room, and then all the lights went out. Joey stood in the dark, tentatively shouting out joyfully, "Will!" The lights flickered. Joey was overjoyed, pointing to the painted letters on the wall that hadn't dried up, and said, "Will, what you want to say, just light up in order. Can you hear me? Will?" After hesitating for a moment, the light on the wall corresponding to the letter Y flashed. Joey quickly asked, "Will, where are you?" The lights on the wall came on one after another. H, E, R, E. Here. Will is here. I knew it, I knew it, I knew you were always there, Will, I knew you were always there. Just as Joey was overjoyed, the lights on the wall began to light up quickly. R, U, N. Then, the indoor lights burst open all the way. The wall where the mucosa appeared before broke again, and a claw pierced the mucosa and stretched out. Will. Run. Will, run. Joey picked up the chair and threw it at his paw while yelling, "Will, hide to a safe place. Run." Will. The next moment, a monster emerged from the mucous membrane. This monster is tall, about 18 feet tall, and has a long and slender body like a giant snake covered with dark green scales. The upper limbs are winding octopus-like tentacles. The legs look slender but strong and powerful. There is no face, but a mouth that can bloom densely with fangs. The monster opened his mouth and shouted at Joey. Joey yelled for Will to run quickly, got out of the house, got in the car, and drove outside. The next day, early morning. This night I finally had a good night's sleep. There was no red name to disturb, and no community service woman knocked on the door. Benny slept until dawn, refreshed. After the three of them had breakfast, they got in Hope's car and took 11 to the school. Hope took Benny to the library. He always feels that there is a problem with the secret laboratory and is ready to find information about it. "Hi, Marissa. Good morning." Benny greeted each other cordially with the librarian, and they hugged each other and pressed their cheeks. "Oh, Ben, hello." Benny walked into the library, and Hope behind him opened his arms to hug him, but Marissa just gave him a sideways glance, and the smile she had just pulled down immediately. "Do you dare to come?" "What?" Hope looked at Marissa with a dazed expression. "You should at least make a call first, just say, 'Marissa, we can't work, sorry for wasting your time, I'm a bastard.'" Benny also looked at Hope with some surprise. "Right." Hope nodded, then asked tentatively, "Maybe we can go out again next weekend." Marissa looked at Hope with a shocked look. Seeing Hope was still looking at her cheeky, she turned her gaze to Benny, who hurriedly shifted Marissa's gaze to Hope. Hope shrugged and said, "Do you have a newspaper here?" Marissa rolled her eyes and walked in with Benny and Hope. "We have the New York Times and the New York Post, both of which are big newspapers. They are classified according to year and subject. You can find the corresponding microfilm in the reading room. We are looking for information on the Hawkins National Laboratory." Hope said calmly, as if nothing happened just now. "So, why don't you start with the New York Times, and we start with the New York Post?" Marissa looked around in shock and left without a word. "Librarian, hey!" Benny stepped forward. Hope shrugged, picked up a stack of newspapers and left. Some things are destined, and even bugs like the Traverser can't resist. There was Benny's chaos. 11 was not picked up by Mike, and there was no lack of care. Even though Benny was really good to her for 3 days with Benny, he still couldn't stop 11 from mixing with Mike. 11, who jumped out of Hope's car, did not enter the school, but stood at the door looking forward to it, waiting until the 3 cyclists came around. "Hi, early 11. Mike greeted with a smile. 11 smiled, followed Mike and walked into the school. "Hey Mike, look!" The 4 were walking on the campus when Lucas suddenly stopped and shouted. Several people looked in the direction pointed by Lucas, just to see Will's brother Lucas surrounded by Steve and Mike's sisters, and the couple who appeared at Steve's house yesterday. Steve grabbed the photo in Jonathan's hand, shredded it, grabbed the camera, and threw it to the ground, then drove away. "Mike, your sister!" Little fatty Justin exclaimed. "I know!" Mike roared with a slightly ugly face. The four of them hid beside the flower bed and watched secretly. Mike's sister, Nancy, stood there hesitating for a moment, did not follow Steve to leave, but squatted down to help Jonathan pick up the photo on the ground. "Nancy!" Steve's shout was heard in the distance, and Nancy looked up at Jonathan, picked up the photo of Barbie sitting by the pool on the ground and left. "Mike, is that your sister's boyfriend?" Several people were sitting with their backs against the flower stand. Lucas asked. "It must be, Mike, your sister is helping Steve bully Will's brother," Justin said. "Should we help? Steve is the boss of the school, we can't beat him." Lucas took out the slingshot from his school bag and grinned at Justin. "Coward!" Lucas quarreled with Justin. "Okay. Enough." Mike felt a little embarrassed. His sister Nancy's behavior made him embarrassed in front of his friends. Mike stood up and clutched his school bag, and rushed into the teaching building angrily. Behind him, Lucas and Justin looked at each other and ran after him. Benny and Hope had a difficult time searching for documents in the library. Although Benny remembers what Hope seems to have found in the library, he does not remember which issue of the newspaper he found, nor can he tell Hope directly. The two had to bury their heads in the pile of materials and wandered arduously. "Hope, Hope! Come and see this!" Benny flipped to a newspaper and shouted excitedly. "Hey! Ben, this is the library!" Librarian Marissa reminded dissatisfiedly. Benny made an apologetic gesture to Marissa and came to Hope with the information he found. Terry Ivor said, her child Jane was arrested by the authorities and his life is unknown. LSD mind control test? Child trafficking. Human trials exposed. The head of the laboratory, Dr. Martin Brunner, was arrested. Who is responsible for the safety of the child? CIA? National Security? Lies. The reports were turned over by Benny and Hope, and they were placed on the table, and the two of them were speechless. "Ben, you..." Benny nodded and said seriously, "Hope, you know, I don't want to lie to you, but there are some things that I really can't tell you. I can only say that it is 1984, the international situation is not good, and the CIA will do everything. Even if I want to tell you, I don't know." Hope nodded thoughtfully, took the newspaper to find a photocopy of Marissa, and drove away. "Hope!" Hope waved his hand to interrupt Benny. "Ben, a child in Hawkins Town has been missing for 3 days. The only clue we found was the piece of cloth next to the water pipe. Ben, we all walked out from Hawkins. Hawkins is our home. Even if you force me to death, I don't know." Benny sighed and had to raise his hands in a gesture of surrender. Okay, follow your instinct. Let's go to the laboratory now." "No." Hope finally smiled. He shook his head, turned the steering wheel in his hand, and drove to Joey's house and stopped. "Let's go see Joey first." Benny rolled his eyes behind him and got out of the car. When they came in, Joey was sitting on the sofa holding the phone in a daze. The room was full of colored lights. A hole was cut in the wall next to the door. The sunlight passed through the hole and shone on the floor, bringing the dim interior to the room. "Bring a glimmer of light." "Joy, are you okay?" Hope sat down next to Joey, put his arms around her and asked with concern. Joey raised her head, a haggard face appeared in front of Benny, she was stunned, and suddenly excitedly grabbed Hope's arm and said, "It's Will. I feel it, Will is in the house. Will is here. He contacted me yesterday." Then, Joey pointed the lantern, raised the wall, and said about the monster he encountered. "Joy. Hi. Joey. How long have you not slept? I think you need to rest. Don't worry, we will find Will." Hope obviously didn't believe what Joey said, thinking it was all her hallucinations. Benny took a deep look at Joey, who collapsed in Hope's arms and cried, and coughed. Joy, can you describe the monster in detail? Joey's eyes lit up, and he quickly raised his head and repeated the things of yesterday with his arms and legs. Hope sat on the sofa and glared at Benny. He felt that Benny was fooling around. Monster? Or a monster crawling out of the wall? Why don't you say you can discharge it? Joey finished his performance, and before Benny could speak, the walkie-talkie on Hope rang. Sheriff, a state trooper found a body in a puddle in a quarry. Repeat. A state trooper. Hope stood up crying. Joey was dumbfounded, and howled when he reacted. Hey, Ben, I'll go there first, you bring Joey over as soon as possible. Hope confessed that people had already ran out of the house, then the engine sounded and the car went away. Hawkins Middle School. Finally, after school was over, Mike quickly rushed out of the classroom and ran up the mountain on bicycles. During class, they learned through conversation that 11 could find Will, and it was in the direction of 11 pointing at this time. Halfway through the ride, the radio that I carried on my body rang. A state trooper found a body in a puddle in a quarry. Squeak! The 3 bicycles stopped. Mike and the 3 were dumbfounded, and couldn't believe it was true. Maybe it's someone else, maybe it's not Will. Justin said palely. Yes, it must not be Will. It won't be Will. Lucas said, pedaling his bicycle, turning in the direction, and galloping towards the quarry. When Joey drove Benny to the quarry, the scene was already full of people. Nancy, Jonathan, Mike's trio, 11, the search and rescue team, the police, all arrived. 2 state policemen lifted a body from the water and put it in a body bag. Joey happened to see the face of the corpse during the Facetophis measurement. He covered his mouth a little, collapsed and lay down in Hope's arms and started crying. The body bag was loaded into the car and taken away, leaving a group of people who stopped and watched for a long time and did not want to leave. Jonathan came to Joey's side, and the mother and son embraced and wept bitterly. The 3 of Mike were dumbfounded, unable to recover for a long time. It's all you! Mike suddenly yelled and pushed 11, who was sitting in the back seat, to the ground. It's all you! Didn't you say you can find Will? It's all you! Mike cried, and Lucas and Justin stood there with tears in their eyes. 11 was pushed to the ground, staring at Mike blankly. Hey! Benny ran over, lifted 11 up, and carefully slapped her off the grass clippings. Boy! How do you talk to a lady? You better pay attention. Benny picked up Mike by the collar, lifted him up, leaned forward and threatened fiercely, if you dare to talk to my daughter like this, I will throw you into the water. Let you be company with your little friend. Have you heard? The sadness in Mike's heart has been replaced by Benny's threat at this time. Benny yelled so cleverly and quickly nodded. Benny snorted, let go, let Mike limp on the ground, glanced warningly at Lucas and Justin, turned around and picked 11 and got into Hope's car. 11, he raised his head and stared at Benny as if he didn't feel any pain, and allowed Benny to help him bandage the wound on his hand, motionless. Those few are bad boys. Boys are bad boys. Listen to your father. Don't talk to boys in school from now on. Benny tied a bow to 11's hand and coaxed. Fake. 11 spit out 2 words and stretched out his fingers in the direction of the corpse truck. Hush. Benny looked around and whispered. Dad also knows it's fake. Let's not tell them. This is a punishment for their rude behavior. After speaking, Benny winked his eyes at 11. What punishment? Hope suddenly asked from the side. Nothing. Benny held 11 and waited for Hope to drive the car away from the crowd before speaking. Do you know those 2 state police? They came from the state to help, not Hawkins. Hope replied. What about the coroner? Hawkins has his own coroner, right? Benny continued to ask. Did you see the coroner today? Hope frowned. He looked at Benny suspiciously. You mean, these people are making fakes? Ask Joey and see what she says. Benny didn't admit it. Will is her child. She should know what Will is like better than everyone else. Soon, the three returned to the police station. As expected by Benny, Hawkins' coroner was not there, but a new one. At the same time, Joey refused to sign the autopsy report, insisting that the body found was not Will. When they arrived, many people were spreading that Joey was crazy because of excessive sadness. The words on the autopsy report were eventually signed by Jonathan, and Joey was nowhere to be found. After all the disturbances, as the sky dimmed and the crowd's onlookers retreated one by one, the police station finally recovered its silence. Find the coroner. When Hope returned to the office, Benny was accompanying 11 to do his homework, and he raised his head and asked after hearing the movement. Hope shook his head, sat down on the chair, took out a cigarette to light it, and was snatched by Benny again. 11 is here. I want to smoke out. Hope curled his lips, threw the cigarette case on the table depressed, and said the coroner has asked for leave. The autopsy report has come out and it is indeed Will's body. From finding the corpse to now. Benny looked up at the clock. It's only 7 hours. How come I don't know when the federal government has become so efficient? Within 7 hours, even the autopsy report came out. Hope fell silent. Benny curled his lips, saw 11 finishing his homework and helped clean up, stood up and asked. We are going back, are you going? Hope hesitated for a moment, stood up and asked solemnly, would you like to come and see with me? Look at what? Corpse. Hope nodded. Strictly speaking, after the family members of the corpse signed it, the corpse no longer belonged to the police station. It was only stored in the police station. Now I go to look through the corpse. No matter what the result is, once they are known, they will not be held accountable. Benny looked at 11, and 11 seemed to feel it, and grasped his palm with his backhand. I'll guard you outside, go in and watch by yourself. With that, Benny pointed at 11. Hope shrugged, expressing understanding. The three of them came out of Hope's office and sneaked into the autopsy room. While there was no one around, Hope took out the key they hadn't gotten from, and sneaked into the autopsy room. 11, Benny touched 11's little head. She was still full-length hair, and her hair hadn't grown much. Instead, she felt a little pierced when she touched it at this time. Dad knows what you have gone through before, and knows that you want to have good friends, but, listening to Dad, Mike and Lucas and the brats are not a good choice. You should find a few girls to play with. You can't mix with boys. Boys are bastards, and they will bully girls, just like today. You use your abilities to help them find Will, but they do this to you instead. After leaving the quarry, 11's mood has been very low. Benny knew it was because of Mike and the others. He also knew that Mike and the others didn't mean it. He also knew that he shouldn't interfere too much with children. But looking at the wound on 11's hand, he just couldn't help it. Just as he was talking, Hope had rushed out of the dissection room angrily. He didn't leave much for a moment, and walked directly outside. Hey! Hope! Benedict took Hope, pulled out the car key, pulled him out of the car, and got into a dark alley. Hope, where are you going? Go to the National Laboratory and find Brenner. Hope said angrily. Hope, there are things I want to remind you. Benny said in a low voice. Whether it is the CIA or the Department of Energy, they are best at not solving troubles, but creating troubles, and then solving those who solve them. Seeing Hope's eyes widened in a look of disbelief, Benny smiled and continued, Don't believe it. Let's go to your house now. What are you going to do at my house? I'll know when I go. Hope doesn't understand what medicine Benny is selling in the gourd, but he has been with Benny for many years and believes that Benny will not harm him. The three drove to Hope's house. Benny made a silent gesture, opened the door gently, and looked around. You don't. When Hope was about to make a sound, he was covered by Benny's hand. Benny glared at Hope, tiptoes to unscrew the chandelier, took out a miniature bug from the inside and shook it in front of his eyes. Immediately after he took out the tape from his pocket and stuck it, the three of them exited the house and returned to the car. In addition to solving people who can solve troubles and creating troubles, the CIA's third best is monitoring. The same goes for the Department of Energy. Hope was silent and drove the car with a sullen expression to Benny's restaurant.